Action.
So I'm about 10 years old. I'm in spending the summer in Nassau, New York, and my grandfather, and I'm guessing the year would have been somewhere in the 50s, maybe middle 50s, Eisenhower era, and I'm spending the summer at my grandfather's farm. And my grandfather was an immigrant. He came over to the United States from an area that was once Austria and Hungary, and in between those two countries. It might be Czechoslovakia now, I'm not sure. So he was an immigrant, and he comes to the United States in 1912. And he does real well, and even though he has a third grade education, he makes a lot of money on the farm, raising cows and harvesting corn, right? And I'm just this little kid, 10 years old, spending the summer with him, and he's riding me around in the truck. Yeah? And I knew my grandfather was sort of a big shot in this little rural farm community, because his farm was like the biggest farm. It really was a big farm. And just acres and acres and acres of corn, that I used to play in. Anyway, one day we get in the truck, and I say, "Grandpa, where are you going?" He said, "Well, I'm going to the bank." And we go in the bank. My grandfather always had cow manure on his shoes because he's cows. I mean, that was his livelihood: corn and cows. And cows happen to do things, when they're out in the field. And my grandfather could care less. He would just he wouldn't pay much attention to the manure. And it was everywhere. I would, make up the
German Shepherds, were they there?
No, the German Shepherds were not involved in this story. They were home at the time because my father now was going to the bank. And the point I'm making is my grandfather always had cow manure on his boots, okay? He just did. And, he would traipse it into the truck. My grandfather never cleaned the truck ever in the entire time he owned the truck. So we go into the bank, and I don't really notice, because I'm with my grandfather, I don't really notice what's going on. But when he gets up to the teller says, "Sir, you just traipsed in cow manure into our bank." And my grandfather got the look, and I'm looking up at my grandfather gets this look on his face as if to say, "That was a big mistake, young man." And my grandfather goes, hands the guy some piece of paper after writing on it, and he goes, "I want to take out all of my money in the bank, every penny of it," right? So the kid, immediately contacts the president of the bank, who comes out and goes, "Mr. Zweig, what, sir, what's the problem? Sam, you've been here all these years." He says, your young associate here just advised me that I traipsed in cow manure into your bank." Well, how dare he do such, trying to get my grandfather to change his mind, right? But my grandfather didn't change his mind. He got, a cashier's check for every penny he had in the bank, and you know what he did? He walked across the street and put that money in the bank across the street, because in Nassau, New York, in that period of time, there were exactly two banks, and they were directly across the street from each other. So my grandfather walks into bank number A, takes all the money out, because that kid reminded him that he walked into the bank with cow manure on his boots. You can't do that in a farm community. That's the moral of that story.
So, was it normal for people to walk in like that, or it was just...
It was normal for my grandfather. I couldn't tell you whether it was normal for everybody else, but I grew up on that farm. And my grandfather he always had the smell of cow manure. And I don't know, are you familiar?
He wouldn't wear them in the house then?
No, my grandmother did require he would take the boots off before he came into the house. I do recall that. Yeah, because I'm sure that she, probably had it out with him about that at some point.
Or he just...
Sam, you can't wear the boots into the house.
Or maybe he just didn't want to track crap into his own
living
space.
I got the impression that he didn't care. That wasn't important. Everybody has important things that are important to them.
Uh-huh.
That was a different time. And farm people...
That was just life.
Well, farm people are different than city. Are you a farm person or a city person?
No, I never lived on a farm.
Well, most people haven't. That was the only time in my life, 2 summers, I lived on the farm. 2 summers. So that's my experience. but that left an indelible imprint, that short period of time. The dog story with my grandfather pulling the bone of the German Shepherd's throat,
Was it Quiche? What was the dog's name?
Zeke.
Zeke. Okay.
Z-E. I don't know how to, I never saw it in print, but I always.
How would you think that you spell it?
Z-E-K-E. Z-E-K-E was how I think it would be
Or
spelled.
not Z-E-E-K or Z-E-A-K?
I think we probably could do any of the three.
Z-E-I-K?
Yeah. But I think people who are named Zeke,
Or Z-E...
short for Ezekiel, are Z-E-K-E. And Ezekiel would be E-Z-E-K-I-E-L. You ever heard that name, Ezekiel?
Yeah, and I've also seen it spelled differently too, like E-S-S...
Yeah. People who live in the South a lot of times have names like that. Caleb is a very popular name in the South. You ever lived in the South? Not where we are, but like Georgia or Mississippi,
Tennessee,
Alabama, those states. See, I lived in those states for 3 years.
So life's different, huh?
Yeah, it's different there. People are named Caleb. Yeah.
Zeke. The story.
The thing I remember most about...
The tale of Zeke, the German Shepherd.
He wasn't named Ezekiel, he was named Zeke. And I don't even know where the name Zeke... I think just one day my grandfather, just get away from me, Zeke. Or you, Zeke. Get away from me, you, Zeke. And all of a sudden he became Zeke. It was just... And my grandfather never had a moment of endearment for the dog. It was never, oh, nice to see you, let me pet you.
Was he there when they died, or was it...
Yeah.
Did you have to put him down?
My grandfather buried all of them. Interesting, isn't that? That's something I forgot to tell you. My grandfather, Sam Zweig, gave every one of those dogs a burial. He never talked to them, never petted them, never showed them any love or emotion. But when they died, each one, and he buried them all in a line. I remember it out near the garden.
Sounds like my dad's house.
Yeah.
Pet cemetery.
Yeah. He said, I'm not getting any more dogs.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah. He said, my grandfather said, so, well, did you care about the dogs? I said, I don't know, they were there. My grandfather...
Obviously, he cared about them.
I fed them.
Was he the type that, did he ever hug you or say he loved you or anything like that?
No. But he gave me $1 every time I would go visit. And that meant a lot to me. In those days, wow. And you get a pack of baseball cards for a nickel. So, that was like 20 packs of baseball cards.
Wow.
$1.
What year was that? Or era?
50s, late 50s.
Wow.
Late 50s. Eisenhower was the president. Richard Nixon was the vice president.
So what do we name this story? About the manure boots. Manure boots in a bank.
Well, the bank has to be included in the title.
Manure boots in a bank.
Oh, I would call it bank etiquette. Bank etiquette. Because, see, that kid, he made a mistake. Before he insulted the customer, he should have known who the customer was. He didn't know my grandfather.
Well, it depends how he said it to the customer.
Oh, I can tell you exactly.
If he said it with a snarky attitude.
Well, he said, sir, you've just traipsed cow manure into our bank. Or into my bank. Did he say our bank or my bank? I'm not sure. He might have said my bank. My grandfather was thinking, I'm sure my grandfather was the biggest depositor. He owned the biggest farm in the small town. When I say a small town, I mean
so
a town
he was pretty wealthy.
500 people. Yeah, my grandfather was the farm was worth a lot of money.
Oh.
Yeah. It was a big farm.
Did you inherit wealth from him?
No, my grandmother sold. My mother sold our interest in the farm, so I never got anything. My brother and I were really pissed because the farm became worth over $1 million.
Who got it?
One of my family members still has the controlling interest. One of my grandfather's son's wife.
It seems like that's how it happens. Like one person kind of.
Yeah.
Because I guess if too many people are involved, it will probably get ugly and messy.
Yeah. My mother, I remember my mother selling her interest in the farm for $25,000, and if she had held it, her interest in the farm would have been worth $250,000. So she made a big mistake. Yeah. It's like the mistake I made when I should have paid $39,000 for the Ferrari. That was the biggest financial mistake in my life.
What?
Want to hear that story? 3 minute story.
Okay.
All right.
So this is
So
the Ferrari. What?
It's 19. It's 19.
Is the story of a title?
Yes. Buy the Ferrari. Is the title. Buy the Ferrari. So it's 1981, and I've just gotten divorced. Okay, and I'm a young judge, and because I've just gotten divorced, I was depressed. I needed something to cheer me up, so I decide I'm going to go look for a Ferrari and buy a Ferrari, and my life will be so much better. And it probably would have been. So here's what happened. So I go to the showroom, and I see this incredible Dino Ferrari. Now, this was the year 1981. This was a 1974 Dino Ferrari. And it had the most incredible paint job on it and a spectacular brand new leather interior. And the car was perfect. So I say to the guy, I said, wow, this is a great car. And we start talking. He knows that I tell him I'm a judge.
Did you see what color?
It was a white gentleman.
No.
Oh, the car? Car was... the car was green. And it had a beige interior, a beige leather interior, and it was the most incredible metallic green paint, like a dark British racing green, incredible. And he told me, the owner told me that the car had just come back from where they make Ferraris in Italy, and they had put 32 hand rubbed coats of paint on the car. Right? So I know he's going to ask for a big dollar for the car, but I'm interested in it. Even though I don't have any money, but I have a good job, my wife cleaned me out, ex-wife cleaned me out. So I said, well, how much is the Ferrari? He goes, $39,000. And I go, gee, it's an incredible car. Wow. If you'd come down, maybe we can work something out. And he says, no, Judge, the price is $39,000. It's going to be $39,000 tomorrow. It's going to be $39,000 next week. So I'm a little taken aback by his attitude. I figure, well, I'm not going to pay $39,000. So I go home, and I'm thinking, well, maybe, I gave him my card, so maybe he's going to call me. A week goes by, and all of a sudden the phone rings at the office, and it's him. My secretary puts me on. I go, gee, Charlie, great to hear from you. Let's talk about that beautiful Ferrari. He said, well, that's why I called you. He says, I really think you ought to buy the car, Judge. I said, come on, let's work on a number. Be reasonable with me. Come down a little bit. He says, no, I told you before, the price is $39,000. So I made one more final attempt. Like a month later, I called him. I said, you still have it? He goes, yeah, I still got it. He said, how about 37? He said, Judge, I'm going to tell you for the last time, the price of the car is $39,000. So I made a couple of calls to see and I just decided it was just, I probably could have walked into a bank and, gotten a loan.
Was there any place that you could have bought the car otherwise that was different price?
No, it was a one of a kind. The Dino was a classic Ferrari. They only made in the hundreds, maybe. It was a one of a kind. And it had I think it had like 3,000 miles on it, and the car was, already 7 or 8 years old, And it was the most perfect one. To this day, it was the most perfect Dino I'd ever seen. It's a very rare Ferrari, They don't mass produce them like Chevrolets, So I tried one more time to get the car, and he turned me down. He wouldn't come down to 37. And that's the end of the story, except 3 years later, I pick up a copy of a magazine. God, I wish I could recall the title of it right now. But there's a magazine that you get in the Publix, in the magazine section, where they just sell exotic sports cars like Ferraris and Maseratis and Lamborghinis. Specializes to that, that market. And I'm leafing through that magazine, and all of a sudden I see a picture of a green Dino Ferrari. All right, so now I want to read the caption under the picture, and I realize it's the car that I passed on. Right, it's the car that I couldn't come up with $39,000. So naturally, I'm looking, what are they selling the car for? And I look at the price, it's $350,000. Right, this is 3 years later, $350,000. Right, so I go, shit, I got to call, Charlie, the guy, and let him know that, because I want him to know what I just experienced. So I get back to the office and I'm thumbing through trying to find it because 3 years has gone by. And I finally find his number, and I call him up. He's still in business. And he remembers, yeah, Judge, how you been? He says, Judge, I know why you're calling me. I said, you know why I'm calling you? He says, yeah, you saw the same thing I saw. He says, I opened up the magazine and I almost slit my throat. I said, well, what did you get for the car? He said, I sold it for $39,000. To some guy who took it to Europe, and I don't know what happened to it after that. But, now it's for sale for $350,000. So I sort of lost out, right, if I had bought that car. So that's why the moral of the story, the title of this story is Buy the Ferrari.
I was thinking of getting a Corvette.
Yeah, pretty nice. Yeah, you can get one. You could buy the basic Corvette, I think, for about $80,000.
So what are the ones that they're selling on Auto Trader for like I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000?
Yeah, they're old ones.
Are they any good?
No,
or
no. The one we saw last week, that was a new one. They came out with a new design a couple of years ago, and now they're coming out with a newer.
So what makes the newer ones better than the older ones?
Well, it's a new design because Ferrari.
I'm talking about functionality wise.
Oh, it's a Corvette, man. You're going to get tremendous power and luxury, and is it a Jaguar? No, like I have. My car is at least 1.5 steps over a Corvette, but that's still, a Corvette's a great car. I mean, it's a fun car. The problem with having a Corvette is you got to worry you're going to kill yourself in it. What do you see?
A roach.
Oh man, kill it.
Oh, this is glass.
Did you get it?
No, it's running up the wall.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, like a napkin. I thought that was plastic.